to the Monday, December 22nd edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Joe Bartel, of course, as we have been here every Monday. You can find me at JB Fantasy Sports alongside my co-host Jake Letarski at RotoJake on Twitter and X. Second to last week of the season. Hopefully for a lot of folks, it means we're talking about the fantasy championships. And unfortunately for a lot of folks, there are names, at least to monitor, even in deeper formats, but certainly ones due to injury, especially at the quarterback position. How do we adjust for that? It will be a shorter show, as will next week as well, too, when we're effectively recapping the entire free agent season and the NFL season as a whole. But just so you guys are aware, we'll discuss some of the more obvious names that likely have been talked about in past shows or are available. Are not available in normal leagues, and then get into some of these deeper formats and deeper opportunities out there too. So let's kick things off, Jake, just going over a handful of the running backs that I think we've mentioned now probably for the past month, but still under 50% roster at the moment.
Yeah, let's just do some housekeeping right away. I didn't want to have the exact same show that we did last week and the week before. There are names that technically fall under our 50% threshold that I would probably put in the top 5. And I would probably start over some of these top 5 guys that we're going to discuss. But, just out of the interest of, one, these guys being likely taken in active leagues, and 2, we've talked about the merits of these players at length. I want to list these names off here as names that you should look towards first. So, and by that, I'm talking about Blake Corum, 41% rostered. He scored a touchdown this week. Emanuel Wilson for the Packers, 37% rostered. Jacobs been banged up, and Wilson just ran better than Jacobs on Saturday night here. Michael Carter for the Cardinals is another one at 42%. That he's RB1 for Arizona, a viable play if you need to. In similar fashion, Tyler Algier had just as many carries as Bijan Robinson this week. He's at 37% rostered. Jaden Reed, Packers wide receiver, a little bit lower usage, kind of had the fantasy days salvaged a little bit by a big play towards the end. He's 50% rostered, and he's a fine wide receiver 3 if you need him. We've talked about Chris Rodriguez of the Commanders at length. He's back healthy. He's 29% rostered. He's RB1 over there. Colston Loveland didn't quite live up to expectations, but he's 43%. And still, if O'Dunes and Luther Burden are out, I think Colston Loveland is a fine fantasy tight end play. And then kind of going back to that Troy Franklin line at 51%. I even saw that Quentin Johnston got down to 64% due to his injury. He's obviously a super volatile fantasy play. I couldn't pull the trigger on him over Watson or over Kareem Hunt this week. And, that might cost me an advancement in one league, but he's out there as well. So Chargers play
the Texans. I do not think that the Texans defensive line will be as toothless as the Cowboys were this week, and I wrote that up in all the Charger updates as well too. That whatever Herbert did, which was awesome. I mean, he was fantastic, and we talked about him a little bit in the show last week. I don't think that's going to be representative of what happens. With
you go against literally the best fantasy matchup. Dallas is ranked 32nd in points allowed to receivers and quarterbacks, to the worst fantasy matchup in the Texans here. So anyway, just throwing that out there. It is a boom or bust TD option. I mean, you could find a touchdown to save the day, but not super favorable on that. And then before getting into the more positional stuff, we did mention this last week, but the Patriots defense, 49% rostered. They are facing the Jets at home. There's no bigger layup in fantasy than the Patriots defense. I would actually spend the rest of your fab, use whatever claim you have to go ahead and stream them, because they might be the number 1 overall ranked defense when it comes to rankings this week. And they could help you get to a title, because it seems like the Jets are committed to Brady Cook. We can get into this in the 2 quarterback segment later on down the road, but Justin Fields was the emergency quarterback. Tyrod Taylor was the backup, and they're still starting Brady Cook, who has been an interception machine. So go after the Patriots at home if you can. But just a little cleanup here, because again, I didn't want to, I can make the same arguments for Blake Corum, 5 weeks in a row. The standalone value type player that's vulturing touchdowns that can also be. I mean, you could viably be winning in the playoffs starting both Kyron Williams and Blake Corum as your 2 running backs. So that's someone to go to, but we don't need to rehash that at length. There are 5 new names that I have that are worth picking up situationally. We'll see how that goes throughout the week. Again, we're doing this Monday, a little after noon Central Time, a little after 1 Eastern Time to get these names. But just to recap, go ahead and check for Blake Corum, Emanuel Wilson, Michael Carter, Jaden Reed, Tyler Algier, Chris Rodriguez, Colston Loveland, Troy Franklin, before you go too deep into any of these dives. But those are all players that can that are far more startable, perhaps, than some of the guys that we're going to talk about.
I'll add one more to the rehash list, but we mentioned it last week with Michael Carter, Cardinals running back. I thought he looked pretty good against the Falcons. Again, no Bam Knight done for the rest of the year, no James Conner, no Trey Benson. Amari DiMercado got some work, but Michael Carter, I think, clearly is still the guy that's defined option. And Tyrone Tracy as well, too, is probably more like 80% rostered to be really shallow formats. He ended up having a pretty good game, at least a good enough game, in that loss to the Vikings here this week for the Giants. So I think it's a good idea, like you said, Jake, just to kind of talk about some of the options that might still be available in shallower formats, but getting to the nitty gritty or guys that might be more that we haven't discussed further. Unfortunately, at least for me, as I have been relying on Quinshon Judkins in every one of my leagues, the lone championship advancer has Judkins starting right now. Alvin Kamara's on the bench. I don't think Kamara's coming back as well. So I'm going to be in need of a running back this week off waivers, Jake. Is there one that you would say you have some sort of confidence in that's widely available right now?
Yeah, I mean, at 0% roster, we have Raheim Sanders of the Cleveland Browns. Now, again, starting Browns players in the championship is always a little bit of a conundrum. But if you were riding Quinshon Judkins this far, it's possible that Sanders is the next man up. I mean, Quinshon Judkins, of course, out for the season with a torn ACL. Dylan Sampson, the other running back in Cleveland, he was already ruled out with hand and calf injuries. It was the second straight game he missed, and he didn't practice at all during the week. Now, obviously, this recommendation could change a little bit if suddenly Sampson comes up and logs limited or full participation in practice. But right now, Raheim Sanders is somebody that you can get, at 0% rostered. And I don't know if he's quite into block your opponent territory, because I wouldn't mind facing him in the championship either. But he is someone that can plug in and play. Now, Sanders and Travion Williams were both technically factors. Both of them saw 20 snaps in this game against the Bills, but Sanders got 11 carries for 49 yards. Williams only got 3 carries for 17 yards. Travion Williams was more involved in the passing game. He caught all 4 of his targets for 38 yards, but Raheim Sanders still had a catch for 4 yards. And of course, the just the running back shares lean heavily in the direction of Sanders. And again, this all is under the assumption that Dylan Sampson is out again, because once again, he did not practice for the entirety of last week. Now, middle of the road matchup there versus the Steelers. And actually, the Steelers held the Lions rushing attack pretty much in check for the entirety of that game. So that's a little bit of a tough matchup this week. Again, we're just basing that on opportunity. But I will be making a bid on Sanders in Stake League, because week 18, in which Stake League points still matter, the Browns are at Cincinnati, who is 32nd against opposing running backs. So if you are doing week 18, that is a possible name right there. But Raheim Sanders is the one name that's new this week that we haven't talked about before, that wasn't on the radar, that is essentially available everywhere, and is someone that, tops the list if we count out those guys that I mentioned at the start of the show.
Let's put into context for everyone that might be just tuning in now or overall is just going over this. Emanuel Wilson, Blake Corum, Michael Carter, you're having all those guys ahead of Raheim Sanders, right?
Yep. And I put Tyler Algier probably ahead of Raheim Sanders. I put Chris Rodriguez probably ahead of Raheim Sanders. If it's a flex situation, I'm going Jaden Reed, Colston Loveland, Troy Franklin, who's right on the edge there. Those guys are all probably ahead this week, because they're they're variables. If Sampson comes back, this is toast. And when it's all said and done, they do have a tough matchup against the Steelers. You're hoping he falls into the end zone or maybe breaks a run on a missed assignment. But it looks like, assuming Sampson doesn't play, and he hasn't practiced in a couple weeks now, that Sanders will get the bulk of the opportunities here. So that's
I would rather play Raheim Sanders over Evan Hull or Audric Estime, who we had talked about last Monday from the Saints backfield perspective. Lo and behold, and I mean, I feel foolish in hindsight that I didn't get this or think it through, but it was neither of those backs. Now, with the Saints down to their 4th-string running back, it ended up being Taysom Hill that got the majority of the ball carry opportunities, also threw a touchdown, which was critical for my best ball team that needed that Chris Olave junk time score at the end to possibly advance here tonight to the $15 million best ball finals on DraftKings. So love me some Taysom Hill, but is he actually the running back one for the Saints in addition to his position at tight end for the team?
Yeah, so we know Devin Neal's on IR. Kamara is not on IR yet, but he hasn't necessarily practiced or participated. There hasn't been any indication that Alvin Kamara is going to suddenly come back here for these 5-10 Saints here. So, yeah, I mean, Taysom Hill makes my top 5, and he really does so as a tight end. I mean, if the same situation is here, and we assume that's the case, I mean, Audric Estime carried the ball 5 times for 19 yards. Evan Hull 5 times for 3 yards. So they're getting work, but they're clearly in a secondary role to Taysom Hill. And not only did he carry the ball 12 times for 42 yards, he caught 4 of 6 targets for 36 yards. And then, he threw that touchdown pass to Chris Olave. Now, will this repeat? I feel like in 10 years almost of doing this waiver wire shows, we've had this Taysom Hill combo on several occasions. Like start him as your tight end when he's playing quarterback. What happens here? But as things currently seem to stand, I guess you are indeed looking at Taysom Hill. And I wrote here, I did fantasy points against opposing running backs. Now Taysom Hill, they are at Tennessee this week, and Tennessee is 18 against opposing running backs in PPR. So Taysom Hill is also a fine play. But the reason he didn't jump out and take my number one play is just because I've seen this narrative before. There's something that I don't trust with Taysom Hill. Obviously, the Jets are a completely hapless defense that are probably, all things considered, worse than the league. Completely demoralized team, traded away their best defensive assets, are offering no resistance in this case. And they go from that to a team in Tennessee who, also doesn't have much to play for. But that team that doesn't have much to play for took it to the Chiefs this week and are going to offer much more resistance for the Saints than the Jets did here. So I'm a little bit wary on Taysom Hill, but he is still a viable play. Like if you're in a real bad tight end situation, and chances are you might not be if you made it this far. But if you could pick up Taysom Hill and start him as a running back, maybe that changes. But does Taysom Hill go over the Jake Ferguson, Brenton Strange line? Maybe, but I'm not loving it.
The Titans' run defense has gotten significantly better after the bye week, week 11, and really kind of in conjunction with the return of Tavondre Sweat, who's that big 360-pound nose tackle that the Titans took in the second round a couple of years ago. I mean, the Chiefs couldn't run the ball against the Titans last week. They didn't really want to. The Chiefs never really want to. But we don't know what the difference of is the third-string quarterback play because Gardner Minshew on ACL tear. Did that impact things overall? I just think it's a credit to the Titans' defense, and it's why conventionally I wouldn't want to play a running back against that. Taysom Hill, if he is the running back, is a lot different, and I'm open to that idea as a tight end with the volume that he ends up getting. But a very interesting name overall. We could discuss the Saints quarterback situation just in general here as we get to the quarterbacks overall. Let's get to the other one, at least from a receiver part of things. Parker Washington, who has been a highlight of us in past weeks. I have been a pretty loud proponent of Parker Washington, and then the trade for Jacoby Myers kind of removed that from the fantasy outcome. Well, lo and behold, he goes nuclear in a crazy win for Jacksonville and reestablished himself as a very clear, I think, an obvious potential pickup and play this week.
Yeah, I didn't think the Jags offense had this in them to go on the road and face a very tough Denver team. But Trevor Lawrence staying hot. Travis Etienne, staying hot, from a fantasy standpoint. And Parker Washington really was wide receiver 1 in this game. And I ranked him here because it's a new name, because he's only 23% rostered, but there are a couple of flags here that I do want to throw up here. I mean, he has had a very inconsistent game log, so you have to keep that in mind if you're starting him in the fantasy championship here. And he was technically wide receiver 3 in terms of snaps. He only had 39 snaps, and whereas Jacoby Myers had 60 and Brian Thomas Jr. had 51. But Brian Thomas Jr. is a total afterthought. And Parker Washington, at least in terms of production, even if he's not on the field as much, is someone who Lawrence is looking to quite a bit more here. And I believe this was the third time this season Parker Washington has had double-digit targets, and some of those were without Jacoby Myers in the mix. But to see him get 10 targets without, with Myers there is very interesting. Now, you look at the previous couple of weeks, he didn't play against the Colts, 3 for 53 against the Jets. And if you go back to week 13 at Tennessee, he only caught 1 pass. So his game log's been volatile and a little touchdown dependent. But he's a stomachable wide receiver 3 in a deeper league. And he is at Indy this week, who's actually surprisingly 30th against opposing wide receivers here. So there can be, maybe it's just teams trying to play catch up with Indy being hot early in the season. That's certainly possible. But I did want to highlight Parker Washington because the receiver climate here just isn't super deep this week. There aren't a lot of new names. The names that I'm seeing pop up, when I compare other sources, are guys that I'm not really loving. So Parker Washington, if you suddenly need a wide receiver, might be the guy to go to.
Last one on this list, and I think I want to contextualize it again. We mentioned Emanuel Wilson, Blake Corum earlier. I think Tyler Algier could be in this mix, but your guy, Tyjae Spears, finally had his breakout game for my 3-10 stake league team that will have zero shot at making it. I've been playing Tyjae Spears for the past month and a half to little success, and he naturally has his best game of the year against this Chiefs defense that I don't blame them if they were checked out at this point. They certainly weren't motivated now, having been out of the playoff race. Tony Pollard the 2 weeks prior was literally league winner, or I guess game or week winners for certain folks. So Tyjae Spears getting to that isn't all that surprising to me, but do you feel like this is something for the future, or is it kind of just a 1 week blip?
Yeah, so this kind of happens towards the end of every season, right? He does this late season resurgence where he finally gets healthy, and then he starts to convince me that he's going to be a thing in 2026. Now, Tony Pollard did have 21 carries for 102 yards, so no slouch there. He didn't have any catches. He played 40 snaps, which is 55%. But Spears had 13 carries for 52 yards and a score, plus caught all 5 targets, and he played 34 snaps, so 47%. This is what I believe to be the closest that the snap distribution has been in a while. And I think part of that is just, having a whole lot of running plays and the game flow of this. But 47% for Tyjae Spears is his highest since week 13, and it's the closest he's been to Pollard since week 13 as well. And there have been weeks 11 and 13. I'm sorry, 13 where he outsnapped Pollard. So I know I was a little inconsistent there, but anyway, looking at the game logs, it's possible that Spears can get more work than Pollard. They have the Saints this week. That'll be a little bit of a tough game given how the Saints have been playing of late. But no, Spears is a perfectly viable, more of a PPR guy. And he's not quite at the same level as the Corum, Wilson, Michael Carter type guys, but he has worked his way into that mix rightfully and is worthy of a re-mention for me. So I threw him up there in the top 5 here, hoping he can build on this with another big game in week 17 here.
Unfortunately for fantasy managers, the quarterback streaming position has gotten just a lot more volume over the past 2 weeks. Mahomes' injury and just overall what the Chiefs are dealing with. We'll get to what that looks like here in a second. Word from our sponsors first, Prosper Trading. Every weekend, millions bet on sports hoping to beat the odds. But here's the truth. The house always wins. With trading, you're not betting, you're building. And at Prosper Trading Academy, we give you the tools, the education, and the live guidance to actually create an edge. You can control your risk, compound your wins, and trade alongside real pros every single day. Stop gambling on games you can't control. Start trading the markets that you can. Visit prospertrading.com/roto, R-O-T-O today, and take your shot at a real financial growth. All right, at the quarterback position, we had talked about it a little bit last week, a few of these streamer options that we didn't know if we liked. Tyler Shough ended up being the right call, at least somebody that I ended up playing. It was Tyler Shough or Aaron Rodgers, Jake. Of course, Rodgers did one more dirty thing to the Lions. Hopefully, by the end of Rodgers' career, we had one more get right for him. But Shough, in his own right, had a really fantastic outing. Again, Titans defense really, really good against the run, very susceptible against the pass when they're not playing third stringers like the Chiefs this past week. So I'm kind of confident that Tyler Shough is going to be an option, possibly if you really need to be deep at quarterback this week.
Yeah, I actually put him at number 2 in my top 5, preemptively here. And the answer is Shough or whatever your streamer is, because there are going to be some situations where you're still streaming. And listen, Shough has quietly had 17 plus fantasy points per game in 4 straight. And like you mentioned, Tennessee is 23rd versus opposing quarterbacks. So that is, plenty of matchup for him to get it going. If I have a miracle tonight in which Justin Taylor outscores Michael Pittman by 17, which I think could happen, then I'm going to be facing Tyler Shough in the Superflex Fantasy Championship. So he's out there. He's been carrying people just enough. And that game, from a fantasy perspective, if he throws that touchdown to Olave and not Taysom Hill, we could do this, whenever. But, it could have looked like an even more stellar fantasy matchup here. So, yeah, Tyler Shuck's an interesting streamer here. But there are a couple of 2 quarterback type guys that I would maybe consider, streaming this week in the same vein as Shough. And do you want to just jump right into those?
Let's do it, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, of course, the Packer game, was a little bit tragic here on Saturday night here. Jordan Love suffered a concussion. And he's going to have to clear protocol before a short week. Remember, it's a Saturday home game against Baltimore.
So it's not a short week, though, because they played last Saturday and then they played this Saturday. So just Do I have hope as a Packer fan? No, never. I have learned, especially this year, don't ever have hope. But it technically is not a short week, so maybe there's that in our advantage.
It's a standard week, yeah. No, fair enough, yeah, because it was Saturday to Saturday. We'll see what happens. That was a pretty nasty hit he took to the head, and he was down on the field for a while, so that didn't look like your run of the mill, had to get checked out. It was a real big shot here. So, again, we'll see what happens, but Malik Willis would be an interesting stream here. Of course, the Ravens D will be able to scheme Malik Willis, unlike the Bears were able to. It's a totally different defensive game plan when someone with the running ability of Malik Willis is under center here. But I just think Malik Willis showed enough. He threw a couple of dimes in that game, and he has a much higher rushing ceiling than Love, that he would absolutely be in the quarterback streaming situation. But once again, Monday afternoon podcast, we don't necessarily know there.
Well, I'll add more data for you here too. Malik Willis did injure his shoulder on that Montez Sweat sack at the very end of the game.
Enough, yeah.
And it actually sounds like the beat reporters I have seen feel Willis is more unlikely to play than Jordan Love, and they don't think Jordan Love is going to play. So that would theoretically open up the door for number 3 quarterback Clayton Tune. Vanilla Vic has been his nickname. He was the former Cardinals quarterback. If you saw it on the video stream there, Jake's face said it all. It was like, that's not good. It is not good if Clayton Tune is the quarterback for the Packers.
Right,
Yep.
So yeah, we'll see there. In a similar vein, though, if you're looking for streamers, again, we'll have to see how the situation plays out over the course of the week. But Lamar Jackson left Sunday Night Football with a lower back bruise. He is day-to-day. Now, the Ravens are not mathematically eliminated yet. They need to win out and have the Steelers lose out. So they will have something to play for here Saturday at Green Bay. Lamar Jackson is hopeful he will play. Otherwise, Tyler Huntley is an interesting streaming option there. So throwing that out for the 2 quarterback leagues there. But I really think, especially given the Packers' uncertainty, that I wasn't as on top of as I thought, especially given that uncertainty, I think it is a Tyler Shough stream if you have to.
Just overall, we watched a lot of bad quarterback play get worse. I think, for example, Quinn Ewers was predictably not very good for the Dolphins. A lot of that 250-plus passing yards came in junk time in a game which was wildly uncompetitive. Gardner Minshew tears his ACL, so now it's Chris Ludicon, who's been more of an athlete as opposed to a quarterback. He didn't look very good. I mean, J.J. McCarthy, I think, broke his hand, or at least I heard there was a fracture in his throwing hand.
So we'll see, but,
so you said it was not – I thought it was a broken thumb.
A broken thumb. See, I thought he avoided fractures, but
okay. I was not very checked in on a game that did not matter at all from any of my fantasy teams or best balls, and also I don't want to watch the Vikings, so exactly. I did everything possible to not care.
Our latest is he appears to have avoided a broken bone, but he's getting under more tests today. X-rays came up negative, and the reason we're going this deep is because as far as championship streams, guys under 50%, J.J. McCarthy 40% versus Detroit. We don't know if he's going to play. Aaron Rodgers, 29% at Cleveland. On the road against that defense, I'm not going to Rodgers. Bryce Young, 19% versus Seattle. Yep. Not super exciting there, even though he's the home team. And then, you're looking at Geno Smith, 13%. Shadur Sanders, 12% versus Pittsburgh. Kirk Cousins, 10% versus the Rams. Cam Ward, 8% against the Saints. Phil Rivers, 6% against the Jags. So that's why we're having this Tyler Shough, Malik Willis, Tyler Huntley conversation, because all of these guys are better than Quinn Ewers, Oladokun. I don't look into this too much, but Joe Milton took over for Dak Prescott on those last couple
that's
drives.
a nothing burger.
I'm pretty sure that's nothing. Max Brosmer, of course, in for McCarthy. Possibly. We'll see what that hand is. Then you got the Commanders situation here. They have a short week on Thursday Night Football. Obviously a great matchup against the Cowboys, but I'm not looking to stream Josh Johnson.
Right.
Marcus Mariota's day-to-day with throwing hand and quad injuries. And, of course, Jaden Daniels been shut down for the year, so Josh Johnson could be the option there. I mentioned earlier in the show that the Jets are rolling with Brady Cook, even with Justin Fields and Tyrod Taylor possibly available. And then, of course, we're going to see more Phil Rivers tonight. But that's some context as to why we're having the Shough, Huntley, Malik Willis conversation.
We will see more Philip Rivers tonight. We're recording this podcast here in the afternoon of Monday. Just a reminder that Anthony Richardson is likely trending in the spot where he could play next week, that he was available to practice this past week. He had that orbital fracture at the same time that I think Charvarius Ward, somebody got that concussion during that ill-fated practice before the game for the Colts or whatever the warm-up was. It does not take a whole lot of imagination for a catastrophic scenario to occur. and Anthony Richardson is your quarterback next week. And I'm only saying that because I would rather have Anthony Richardson over a lot of other guys and possibly over Tyler Shough as well, too. Not that I think Richardson's any good or the accuracy will be fixed at all with him being on injured reserve and not playing much this year, but it's just the athleticism and what he means to an offense that has used Richardson in some capacity that, I don't know. I mean, you're shaking your head. I understand why Shough is a safer option too.
I'm like, this is my pondering head movement here. I mean, Jags are 24 against opposing quarterbacks. Yeah, maybe that could be something. We'll see. Obviously, week 18, they're at Houston. I'm not touching that.
It's a look-ahead game.
So, maybe he could work his way in there, but I don't know. He could easily just go out and have a Jackson Dart game like we saw this week. So
he certainly could. And he's done it before. Just something to monitor, again, with Philip Rivers here playing tonight. What happens in the worst-case scenario? We're not going to be recording a podcast until next week, and we probably won't be recapping the Colts season anyway because it probably ends here tonight against the 49ers. So we'll go over the running backs and just kind of talk about some of the options that we have mentioned early in the show in just a second. Word from our sponsors, Playoff Blitz. All right, check this out. If you're like us and hate when fantasy season ends before the real football gets good, you've got to try PlayoffBlitz.com. It's fantasy football built for the NFL playoffs. No draft, no waivers, no sweat. Members just pick a lineup each week from the playoff teams, and you can only use each player once. So once you start a player, you lose him. That's where the strategy, of course, kicks in. Remember, no need to hold a draft. Just create a league and invite your friends. Starting a league, it's super easy, and it takes less than a minute, and you're all in for the wild card weekend to the Super Bowl. PlayoffBlitz.com is your home for playoff fantasy football. Leagues start at $79. You can invite as many people as you like. Run an office league, invite league mates from regular season fantasy leagues, or even just get your grandma's bingo league in there. I don't care. Join today at PlayoffBlitz.com, where fantasy football meets the Super Bowl. Enter promo code ROTOY or ROTOWIRE for a discount on your league today. All right, running back position. Again, we kind of talked about Jawar Jordan, Michael Carter last week. There's some shallower leagues like Blake Corum, Emanuel Wilson, a lot of guys who've rehashed before. Tyjae Spears probably becomes in that mix. It's Raheim Sanders that would be the bigger one that, again, with Quinshon Judkins done for the season, Dylan Sampson not playing the past couple weeks, maybe Rocket Sanders is a fantasy asset for the Browns, although tough matchup.
Yeah, if you're fast-forwarding just to the running back section of the show, we obviously Blake Corum, Emanuel Wilson, Michael Carter, Tyler Algier, Chris Rodriguez. All those guys are viable options, and we'll see how Raheim Sanders goes. Again, that's dependent on Dylan Sampson's practice status. Tyjae Spears is a PPR upside option. You hinted at Jawar Jordan there. He's interesting. Woody Marks was all week seemingly like he was going to play. Then he doesn't, but Nick Chubb plays. Jordan carried the ball 15 times for 53 yards. More importantly, caught all 5 of his targets, only 17 yards. But he played 30 snaps, which was 46% compared to 32% for Nick Chubb, who had 6 carries for 33. So Chubb is an auto fade. If Marks is out, I think Jawar Jordan is playable here. And there are a few more quick hitter names in that kind of same vein. Do you want me to blitz through those?
I think so. The running back positions is tough right now. So yeah, let's get through a few.
Yeah, at 14% roster, Jalen Wright, 9 carries, 35 yards, and his score, caught an 18-yard pass. Some of that was garbage time here for the Dolphins, who are getting blown out by the Bengals. We'll see if the Dolphins stay in mail-it-in mode. But Jalen Wright, 18 snaps, which is 31% compared to 71% for Achane. So yeah, not super excited about that, but it's a name if you need one. Also wanted to note Samaje Perine at 4%. He vultured a touchdown from Chase Brown, who actually had 3 of his own. But the snap distribution is interesting here. Chase Brown, 37 snaps, 61%. Samaje Perine, 23 snaps, 39%. So Perine's a lot closer to Brown's snaps than Wright is to Achane snaps. That's interesting there too. Similar distribution. Look at Isaiah Davis against the Jets. Saw some work as a pass catcher. Caught all 4 targets for 52 yards. 3 carries for 8 yards. Now that's compared to 16 carries for Breece Hall, so it's still Breece Hall's backfield. But he did play 24 snaps compared to 42 for Hall. I mean, in the end, championship teams don't start Jets. They're playing the Patriots, who are number 5 versus running backs.
Exactly,
But again, that's why they're safe for quick hitter format. Also in the Cowboys, Malik Davis took 20 snaps compared to 33 for Javonte Williams. That gap appears to be narrowing, but there was a little bit of garbage time involved there, and the Cowboys are really out of it.
And reminder, Javonte Williams was injured last week as well, too. He had missed the first half of that game with the stinger shoulder thing. Comes back in the second half because Malik Davis got injured on the kickoff. Never caught a pass, didn't do any pass blocking stuff. I still think Javonte Williams is banged up. That's partially why we're seeing the split.
Yeah, so Malik Davis is interesting. And then much to our chagrin, LaQuint Allen tried to sneak some red zone touches from ETN, but ended up having an inconsequential day. If you really, really are going down the list and might need
and that was with no Bashal Tootin out.
Yeah,
so that's why LaQuint Allen
does it. Yeah, that makes the list there. So really we go from the 8-team leagues to the 16-team leagues in listing your running back names as far as guys that you want to consider if you have to, if you're in a pinch. We'll see what happens.
Before we go over to the receivers, it's a bit deeper, although complicated by the quarterback injuries that we discussed earlier. Word from our sponsors, Dabble. Dabble isn't just another DFS app. It's the ultimate social platform where you can connect with other fantasy sports lovers. Dabble lets you win big because you can win 5,000 times your money this football season. Starting with Dabble, it's super easy. New users get $25 free when signing up. No deposit necessary. Check out the link in the episode description below to download Dabble now. We'll also get a word from our sponsors, Blue Wire. Okay, we're back again talking fantasy receivers. Parker Washington was at the top of our list. Troy Franklin could be probably close as well, too. Although I still think, it's dependent on the stats of Pat Bryant, but if you were watching that Broncos-Jags game, Pat Bryant got, speared.
He went to the
just
hospital.
completely annihilated. I thought it was a very dirty hit, quite frankly, relative to the game where the Jags had already basically won it anyhow. I would be shocked if Pat Bryant is available. And with that being the case, Troy Franklin probably elevates almost into possible must-play territory, given the Broncos' volume, the way they use those receivers.
Franklin had a great game against the Packers without Pat Bryant. So
yes.
Shovels, obviously Cortland Sutton's still number one there, but a lot more volume is shoveled Franklin's way when an ancillary option is out there. So, looking at that. Other than that, man, it's getting real, real tough here. I mean, Matt Collins has clearly risen above guys like Kayshon Boutte and Demario Douglas in the New England pecking order. He had 9 targets, caught 7 for 69, so he's a little interesting. Olamide Zaccheaus is getting mentioned all over the place for the Bears. I'm just not buying it. It's very dependent on the health of Burden and O'Dunes, but I forget the guy's name who got the touchdown. That wasn't Zaccheaus, and Colston Loveland, I think, will still be more involved than he was. So threw that name on there. And then it looks like Devontae Adams with his hamstring injury, who missed this week on Thursday night, apparently is not expected back week 17. So, we were trying to sort out who the heck these guys are in the Rams pass catching group. But when you look at the numbers, Konata Mumfield operated as the wide receiver too. 42 snaps. That was only 46%. Ended up catching 3 balls for 40 yards. Targeted 8 times, which was the second highest on the team. Still half of the Puka Nacua targets, who was targeted 16 times. And, of course, you got Terrence Ferguson ended up with a touchdown there. But if you're looking at on the field targets, snaps, Konata Mumfield was the wide receiver 2 for the Rams. Not starting championship week unless it's a 20-team league.
So if those running backs and receivers were not inspiring to you, and frankly, Jake, they were not to me as a team that's going to be making it and will have to be deciding for a few of these come to the fantasy championships, may I entertain the idea of a tight end being a flex play? It has been basically the season where you could do so. If you had the Jawan Jennings of the world, Brenton Strange at various points, Zach Ertz, it's like, yeah, you're missing out on the upside if you get some of these obvious flex plays correct. But boy, it's a nice safer floor relative to the Mumpfields of the world that you could have out there. You arguably made the best call of our entire Waiver Wire podcast, and I was wrong about this. The crazy 48 hours after we recorded the Monday podcast regarding Colby Parkinson, tight end for the Rams, was absolutely insane. I have not seen a fever pitch relative to, I don't know. I mean, I don't remember a time where every single fantasy analyst I've ever seen or respected said, pick up and play Colby Parkinson to some degree come last Thursday. Naturally, he has a letdown game, multiple drops in that one, but it was Terrence Ferguson who scores. Davis Allen gets the big plays. I still think you're right, Jake. I acknowledged it afterwards, after the show Tuesday. I had sent you DMs being like, Jake, I think you had this right. I messed this whole thing up. Yeah. And I think I'm still of the belief that if Devontae Adams is out, it's not Mumfield per se, but that Colby Parkinson could still be an option. I mean, he burned everyone last week.
Yeah, I mean, the logic that led to the Parkinson decision here is still the same. The high red zone usage is very interesting. Now, at Atlanta, who's number 3 against opposing tight ends somehow, which is a little bit weird here. Now, the Falcons actually shut down Trey McBride this week, but Elijah Higgins caught 7 of 8 targets for 91. That's just some weirdness here. I think the Falcons focus in on dialing in on stopping that top tight end. That doesn't change the fact that Parkinson could still get an extra red zone look or two. He's a TD dependent option here, but of course, Taysom Hill is very interesting. Colston Loveland, who, didn't have a huge game against the Packers, but he's another one where the logic that led to a possible Colston Loveland play is still holding the same, given the banged up state of the Chicago Bears receiving core. He's an interesting option. Dalton Schultz had another good game. He's been floating right around 50%, caught the only touchdown that Stroud threw in that game, I believe. So, that's interesting. What did I got? I got Loveland, I got Hill, I got Schultz. If you need a longer shot, AJ Barner had a pretty good game, caught 4 of 6 for 49 in his score. More interesting to me is that he played 64 snaps, which is 94%. He was actually on the field more than Cooper Kupp. But just the flag on AJ Barner, he was below 8 PPR points in each of the prior 4 weeks. So like Parkinson, a very touchdown-dependent option. And, I alluded to Elijah Higgins, but, with Trey McBride out on the field, I'm not really worried about anything that Elijah Higgins does. So
Brenton Strange is also probably on my list too, just in that same sort of vein as Dalton Schultz of the world. He scores a touchdown against the Broncos. They play the Colts next week. We'll have to see how the Colts defense does against George Kittle. I'm not expecting a whole lot given they're missing Sauce and Charvarius Ward and DeForest Buckner and probably out of the postseason hunt come next week. So just something to monitor as well too with the way that Trevor Lawrence has been playing and overall that offense. I don't mind Strange as well, but I would agree it's kind of a combo list of weird guys that you're hoping get some sort of volume, but also not guaranteed in any sort of capacity either to do so.
Yeah. Not much more to say about that. You know the names to look for.
I guess real quick, let's end it on any defensive streamers. You mentioned the Patriots defense at 49% at the moment. They were at the top 5 overall waiver wire pickup list. Outside of the Patriots defense, is there anybody else that you consider to stream and play this week?
Yeah, honestly, if we go strictly by our threshold under 50%, the Patriots are the top overall pickup this week, even over your Corum, Wilson type guys that I listed at the beginning. They're going to be started in a lot of fantasy championships. That's the layup play. You're home against the Jets. Low over-under game, playing against Brady Cook probably. Can't go wrong there. The Packers without Micah Parsons fell below 50%, so they're at 47%. They're at home. We'll see if weather's a factor in that case. If the Packers are not playing Lamar Jackson and it is Tyler Huntley, then that becomes interesting, but, still not a huge fan of streaming that. Again, chances are you're streaming whoever carried you here or the Patriots, but if you're still looking, Tampa Bay is also interesting. I don't love that they're on the road at Miami, but they're probably getting Quinn Ewers again, who showed absolutely nothing against the Bengals, who are the worst defense in the league. It's the Bengals or the Cowboys by a mile. So that's interesting. And, it's funny. I just say the Cowboys are the worst defense in the league, but they're on the road this week, but it's a short week, Thursday night football, possible Josh Johnson here. I don't feel good about streaming them, but if you had to, that's the name here. So chances are you're going with the Patriots or whoever got you here, but Packers and Buccaneers, maybe I put the Bucs ahead of the Packers by a hair because we have a better shot of knowing who their opposing quarterback is going to be. But, just a couple of options to potentially look out for there.
It'll be tough, hopefully, for your fantasy championships. You're not too reliant on some of these third-string quarterback situations, or you're not reliant on who Brown's running back is to replace Judkins, like I might be. But we'll be back again this time again next week after the holidays. I will be in a different location, so we'll have to see if the video portion ends up translating. But audio-wise, we'll be here next week. We recap the overall fantasy season typically in that show, maybe discuss over a 10-minute span kind of the waiver wire options that you might need if your championships are unfortunately played on week 18. And we also kind of just do a digest overall in the NFL season too, going over our pick totals. And I know Jake had a monster year last year. I don't think it's going to happen the same way this year.
It's not the same this year. Definitely not the same this year. I already looked. I knew that. I don't want to say flash in the pan, but I knew there was no way I was going to live up to the year before and over under totals. And we'll see. But yeah, maybe it'll be the tuxedo show if we do waiver wire awards, like who are the top pickups that got you here and the rationale behind picking them up. It's like a season in reflection, the getting the top waiver. What were the factors that you saw to get you there? And, did they help you potentially win your league? And there are going to be a handful of names that pop up like that are going to be very interesting. So ready to roll.
This is the final show, at least before the holidays for a lot of folks. Obviously, drive safe as well, too. I just want to take a time to say thank you for all the listeners. Mm-hmm. You and I, Jake, have probably gotten the most interaction on Twitter, JB Fantasy Sports for myself, at RotoJake for Jake, than we've ever had before doing this. We've done this podcast now 6 years, 7 years, something like that. It's been awesome to engage with you guys. I've seen a lot of people in the comment section on the YouTube page as well, too, talk about their championship teams that they're making it there. it is a privilege every single year, even though it's been a tough waiver wire year just overall. It's a privilege to be able to interact with you guys, hopefully get you the fantasy glory that we are always striving for as well in the industry. And it is never lost on me how fun this is, stressful this is, and something that I really, really appreciate to be alongside you guys too. So we don't get a chance to always talk about this. I think when the show is not as filled with options as maybe we could spend a minute or two just thanking you guys, the listeners, and just making it through a transitional and interesting RotoWire year as a whole. I know that it's something I care about deeply. So I just wanted to take this time to say thank you to everyone out there.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it any better, Joel. We are very thankful for everyone that supported us. And if you're tuning out, we always say at the end of the year, right? If you're playing in a meaningful matchup in week 18, probably quit that league, but we'll be back next week just in case. Otherwise, again, I couldn't have said it any better. Thanks to everybody for all the support all season long. And for all the interaction and everything else there. We're very lucky to have such an awesome audience.